Chris Grove here for another film review. As promised, we are doing 1980's The Shining today. The Shining is a Stephen King adaptation, directed by Stanley Kubrick. The Shining stars Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance, Shelley Duvall as Wendy Torrance, Danny Lloyd as Danny Torrance, and Scatman Crothers as Halloran. This film is about a family that treks up to the Overlook Hotel and has some wacky adventures up there. Kind of like, Chevy Chase going to Wally World and Vacation. Not really. Obviously, this is not a comedy. Some serious business, directed by Stanley Kubrick, written by Stephen King. And the film is pretty dramatic and horrific in its own right, but also very hilarious. The film is about a struggling writer and former teacher who decides to pack up the family and accepts a job as a winter caretaker for the Overlook Hotel, where he can basically do his job minimally and let his wife handle most of the details while he works on his writing project. They soon discover that the house is haunted, and it really wreaks havoc on the family unit, wreaking havoc on Jack's mental health and on Danny's clairvoyant power, also known as The Shining. So let's break it down. Let's go ahead and talk about this. The Shining starts off with Jack Nicholson going into the interview. And he gets the job immediately, because wouldn't you hire Jack Nicholson playing Jack Nicholson? No, he does a great job here. He really does. But he is full on, in Nicholson mode, with the eyebrows and the, nice to meet you. How you doing? All right. He's doing that whole thing. And he's full on Jack. And it's beautiful and it's brilliant and it's awesome. And he's doing the best that he, can do to impress these guys. And apparently they're impressed. But he comes across as a little off, which is the first unique difference from the book. The book, Jack was more of a normal character. Jack Torrance, that is. More of a normal character. He has his issues. He has a problem with alcohol. Probably some anger management issues there. But he comes across like a more normal character. Like the Steven Weber character that was depicted later in the TV version of The Shining. Something more along those lines. A more average everyman, not Jack Nicholson, being super eccentric and so Nicholson-y. So that's like one of the big glaring first differences between the book and the film. And one that Stephen King took issue with. So he gets the job, he packs up the family. We learn prior to this that Danny likes to talk. He has a little friend named Tony who he talks to, a little finger, like, Tony, how you doing? Danny isn't here, Mrs. Torrance, that kind of thing. Tony is his voice of The Shining. He tells Danny things. Basically, he's the voice of his psychic power, of his clairvoyance, if you will. And off they go to The Shining. Off they go to the Overlook Hotel. So they're at the Overlook, and they're kind of shown around, and Halloran, played wonderfully by Scatman Crothers, shows Wendy and Danny around the Overlook, and he's the head chef there, and shows them the kitchen and that area, and meanwhile they're giving Jack the other tour, and he realizes that he can communicate telepathically with Danny when he asks him if he likes some ice cream. And Danny replies telepathically, or just gives him that look like, yeah, okay. So, they go ahead and give him some ice cream, and he has a little chat with Danny about The Shining and its origin, and how he and his grandmother, Halloran and his grandmother, could have conversations just inside their own head, basically. Just, communicating back and forth telepathically. And they called it the Shine, or the Shining. And now he knows that Danny can shine too. So he kind of warns him about some things, like room 227, like don't go in there. And Danny's like, okay, yeah, whatever. Of course, eventually he's probably gonna go in there, check it out. So here they are, their first few months there, or first few weeks, I guess. And everything's going well, I guess, but there's the isolation is starting to kick in for Jack, and the walls are starting to close in, even though it's a beautiful hotel and they can walk around and he can write and play handball and all that good stuff. He starts to get a little short-tempered with Wendy, who interrupts him as he's writing, and he just kind of starts acting a little like a dickhead. So doesn't need to be doing that, but he does. He's a bit of an asshole. And he soon kind of goes to the dark side. It's a slow progression, but you can tell he's just slowly losing his mind. Meanwhile, Danny keeps seeing the Grady twins, which are these girls that were murdered by the previous caretaker 10 years prior to this. And we learned about this in the interview, that there was a murder 10 years prior to this. Of course, Jack assures his employers that this will not happen to him, and thank you for letting him know. So, things are getting a little more tense, and Danny's having more and more visions of the Grady twins, who were murdered by their father, who, because of cabin fever and the isolation, murdered his wife and two little girls. And so he's slowly, Jack is slowly starting to go a little nuts, and Danny's starting to have more visions. Meanwhile, Wendy's doing all the work in the place. She's just, cleaning house, checking the boiler rooms, making sure everything's right. She's communicating with the guys via CB radio, checking in with them. She is the responsible party here, and she's doing a hell of a job. So she's doing great. Jack is supposedly writing. And things just get a little bit more and more tense until they start to get more visions of ghosts. Well, it starts with Jack when he goes to the gold room. He starts to see the bartender there. And of course, he hasn't had a drink in 6 months, so now he wants a drink. And, he just orders, what is his drink of choice? Bourbon. So he drinks, he orders a bourbon, which is totally fake, because they totally clean out the liquor before they close down for the winter. So he's hallucinating big time. And he is having this conversation with Lloyd, the bartender, and he's talking about how he could be abusive when he drinks, or even maybe when he doesn't drink. There was an episode where he was grading papers or something when he was a school teacher, and Danny came by and scattered his papers everywhere, and he yanks him up by the shoulder and feels like Wendy won't let him forget it, because Danny all of a sudden comes in injured one day while they're at the hotel, and actually the very previous scene to this one. And, obviously he's got bruises on his neck, and she thinks it's him. And he's like, no, it wasn't me, but can't really convince her. But finally, Wendy comes running down the hall, finds him in the bar, and says, there's someone in the hotel with us. A crazy woman has strangled Danny. So he goes and checks it out. Apparently Danny went into the infamous room 227, and he finds a beautiful nude woman emerging from the bathtub, and is like, this'll work, this is cool. She embraces him, and all of a sudden they start to kiss and make out, and it turns out to be she turns into a rotting corpse, and he just backs off and leaves, and is total denial, and said, I ain't seeing anything. So Wendy's like, are you sure you didn't see it? And he's like, yo, no, I didn't see it. No, nothing. I think this is all in Danny's head, and we need to, whatever, just we're good here. And she's like, well, I think I need to take Danny to a hospital. We need to leave. You want to leave the hotel, he says. And, he gets a little more sinister with her, and basically blames her for his failures in life. And, if we leave now, he's not living up to his obligations to his employers at the Overlook. And how dare her, basically. Which is a bunch of bullshit. But anyway, that's what he's doing. And, then he goes back to the bar, and he actually runs into the ghost of Grady, the former caretaker from 10 years prior, who acts as wife and the 2 twin girls. And that's when Grady informs him that his son is plotting against him, and he's a willful boy, and he and his wife probably need to be dealt with in the harshest way possible. And we'll kind of leave it from there, as you can see where this is all going and heading. So there's some differences, though. The visions that they see, and I'll go into some minor spoilers, I guess, but there are some visions, and not just Jack seeing them, and not just Danny seeing them, but Wendy starts to see them too. And there's some bizarre visions there, like a guy in a tuxedo and a guy in a bear suit, kind of getting it on a little bit, if you know what I mean. It's bizarre imagery. She sees a whole hallway corridor fill up with blood, which was the original trailer to this film. Just an empty, sterile white room slowly filling up with blood. And the movie doesn't have a lot of gore. There's one scene, a couple scenes actually, and some flashback scenes there of gore. But other than that, it's not terribly gory. It's just one big mind explosion, really. This film is very psychological, and it works well on that level. Stephen King's problem with the film was that he likes Jack Nicholson as an actor, but he really wanted someone more low-key and not so eccentric to play Jack Torrance. Someone probably more like Steven Weber. And Jack is delightfully eccentric in this, and comedic as hell, and the way he goes after, he taunts Wendy and goes after her and goes after Danny, and I mean, it's just sinister, frightening, intimidating, and also funny as hell, because it's Jack and he's full-on eccentric. And he just does a wonderful job of doing that. Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall, does a great job too. And considering what she went through in this film, Stanley Kubrick is notorious for doing 100 plus takes in certain scenes. And there's an infamous scene where she is backing away as Jack is coming toward her, and she's carrying a bat. He's telling her to drop the bat, and she's kind of, swatting at him, and she just looks exhausted. That's because they did the take like 127 times, just a lot. Scatman Crothers was the next film he was in was called Bronco Billy, directed by Clint Eastwood. And Clint Eastwood only did one take typically, unless there was a total screw up on the set. And Scatman was just like, "We're only doing one take? Oh my god! Oh, I had to do like 127 of them with Kubrick over there. Thank you so much." He was just thankful that they only had to do one take, and Clint Eastwood's probably like, "Oh, no problem, whatever." So it's a very interesting. The departure from the book is interesting. So first, you have Jack, who's eccentric. You also have themes of warmth versus cold, and this isn't really a spoiler, but the essence of the film, the book versus the film, is that in the end of the book, the hotel burns. At the end of the film, it freezes. And as Stephen King says, "I'm a warm person. That's why I wanted the hotel to burn, metaphorically. I'm not a cold person. Kubrick's vision left me feeling cold," he said. And the whole metaphor of the hotel freezing at the end just proves that point to him. So there you go. That's King's take over Kubrick's take. And Kubrick had a great vision. He tortured Shelley Duvall mercilessly on set to get a exhausting, emotional performance out of her. And she looks just wrought. She is just... her eyes are just bulging out. She was sick on set half the time. You just want to take her and just give her a hug. Not just the character, but the actress herself. Because it's almost like she's living it, doing take after take of every scene. And Kubrick's a genius, but that doesn't make him good for his actors, or good to his actors. He wrings them out mercilessly. And he's kind of notorious for doing that. Got a reputation anyway. And some of it might be a little far-fetched, but I don't think it is. I think a lot of it was pretty close to the truth. It's a great film. It's a great character study. I could relate to Jack in some ways, and that disturbs the hell out of me. I don't worry, I'm not about to go become an axe murderer and break down a door and stick my head through the door and go, "Here's Johnny." I'm not going to do that. But there are some elements of his personality I can relate to. Obviously, he has like a day job. He's a teacher. He works in education. I work in education. I do admissions at a university. Not a teacher, but he aspires to have a creative outlet. Hence his writing, or supposed writing, as you'll see in the film. He has a drinking problem. I've been there. He has a problem with anger management. I've been there too. I get it all. So I can relate to his character on some levels. Not on all of them, thank God. But he really does an excellent job of slowly losing his mind. But, again, he starts off being eccentric Jack Nicholson. So It's not like he was totally normal to begin with and then just sort of lost it. It's a slow progression of slightly off kilter to even more off kilter. And it's a great performance. Danny Lloyd, young child actor at the time, who was only in like 2 things, does a great job. Really good job at handling some difficult situations. Apparently, Kubrick was really nice to him because he was a child actor and he nurtured him. And he didn't even know he was in a horror film, Danny Lloyd. He just thought, he was told that it was like kind of a drama or something. It wasn't supposed to be super scary or anything, but obviously he's having to act in horrific scenes. And Kubrick does, I know he loves doing a lot of really supercilious, having characters do supercilious impressions or facial expressions in their scenes. Like, people will just be freaked out and the camera will zoom on someone just doing this for like 10 seconds. That's something, that's like, oh shit. Okay. So exaggerated emotional expressions. He just loves to go there and just zoom in on that shit. So interesting film, interesting concepts of King's work, but totally different, and King didn't totally dig it. I think he respects Kubrick at the end. I think Kubrick respects King, but they just weren't jiving on this at all. But it's still a great film, worth checking out if you haven't seen it. It's it's only 42 years old now, being 2022. It came out in 1980, but it's just great performances, great story. It's long, it's meandering, kind of like my reviews sometimes. But it's really worth checking out. So do check out The Shining. You'll find something to love in it, or be horrified by. Either way, it's a win-win. So for Chris Grove reviews, check out The Shining from 1980. Until next time, I will catch you later. Peace out.